This Wellness Wednesday is brought to you by Michigan Therapy and Counseling.
The holidays are here, but with so many commitments and errands, blink, they're going to be over. That is why it's so important to slow down and cherish this precious time of year with our friends and family. For Wellness Wednesday, we are joined once again by Chad Alley, our friend from Michigan Therapy and Counseling, to discuss ways that we can better communicate and connect this holiday season and discuss almost a taboo word when associated to the holidays, self-care. Welcome back, Chad.
Thank you, Eric.
Now, let's start with being better communicators that allow us to connect. How can we do this? What steps can we take, Chad?
There's a couple things. Like over the years I've been a therapist, there are two things that come up every holiday season. It's navigating family dynamics and high levels of stress.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting because when we look at high levels of stress, 90% of people report that between the period of Thanksgiving and New Year's, their stress level is elevated.
Really?
70% of those people, after the holidays, have regrets about the holidays because of that stress level. They didn't get to enjoy themselves.
Exactly. It's almost, they're so busy going from one thing to the next that they don't take time to really soak it in.
Right. And so that brings us then to the topic that we talk a lot about in the office, and it's family dynamics. And so we live in a time where things are pretty polarized.
Yeah.
Where there's us versus them, where there really is a tribalization that has happened. The problem with tribalization is that it does make us feel connected in a very shallow way.
Yeah.
But in order for that to work, there has to be an other. There has to be an enemy of some kind.
Yeah.
Instead, what we want, instead of polarization and tribalization, is community, because community has depth to it. And community is what we want to start with in our own families. So we think about like family dynamics and how to navigate when the holidays are coming up. We're going to be around people that we're not normally around.
Exactly.
People are going to be saying things to us that we maybe don't agree with. And so what we want to do is give ourselves some space. And so to navigate the family dynamics, we have to remember that it's okay for us to have boundaries.
Yes.
And the boundaries are for us, not for other people. I can only set a boundary for me. I can't set a boundary for you. And if you choose not to respect my boundary when I communicate that to you, then I get to make a choice about how I want you to be in my life.
Interesting. So really what it seems like it's boiling down to is setting those boundaries and making sure you're communicating at your family gatherings, your business party, etc.
Right. And so one thing that we need to think about is that when somebody's in our life, and maybe they say something that we don't agree with, instead of reacting, which takes all of our choices away, because when we react to something, we start drama, and we have that one choice and that's it. Instead, we want to respond. And in order to respond, we have to give ourselves lots of choices. So we can approach a situation with curiosity instead of anger. So maybe, Eric, you say something to me that I don't agree with, and I say, you know what, that's really interesting. Tell me more about where you're coming from. And we begin communicating with each other in a safe way. And instead of moving towards, because I was offended, I'm going to reject you, I'm instead trying to build a community with you.
And building that connection and that scenario you just painted for us, I clearly see you trying to set the boundaries, and if I respond by just yelling more stuff at you, you then have the choice to, yeah, I'm not engaging with this conversation.
And so the interesting piece is that instead of like just reacting, we want to respond. But some people need a speed bump so that we can not react, we want to move into the response area. And a great speed bump is to remember that I can only give you information. I can't make you do anything with that information.
Exactly.
So if we think, like, even if it's something offensive, all that is information. And information isn't offensive or reactive. We choose
It's just
that.
facts.
Right. And so we want to move to an area like where we are just getting information and we're sharing information with each other. Now, sometimes like we need a few other choices with our responses. So I can say to you like, hey, that's an interesting thing. Let's talk more about that later. So we don't have to do it right then. Let's talk more about that later. What I want to make sure I do though is listen so that you feel heard. Because if you come at me and you're saying some things and I just dismiss it, you don't feel heard, you're going to try even harder. If I say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but let's talk about that after dinner. Or I hear what you're saying, but I really want to focus on what the kids are doing right now.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, but let's take the dog for a walk later. I really want to learn more about that. Even if it's something I don't agree with, what I want to do is approach you with curiosity. Because we want to move away from polarization, where there's one side or the other. Instead, we want to move into, tell me more about that. And I want to ask you 6 or 8 questions to keep you talking so that I learn. Right, to keep engaged.
Exactly. Now, we only have about a minute and a half left, and I feel like we could just keep going on, and I want to get to the topic of self-care, because I know, just for me personally, if I do any actions that are self-care while passing on a holiday party, I'm going to feel ridiculous amounts of guilt. How do we overcome that?
So one thing to remember is that self-care is preventative.
Okay.
Survival is triaged. And so if we go back to 90% of people are stressed out over the holidays, most of those people are in survival. So self-care is not going to work.
No.
Instead, what does work is connection with others. And so, can you go to that holiday party, but maybe just relax a little bit when you go? Don't worry about what you're wearing. Don't worry about if you're going to necessarily be on time. Don't worry about who's going to be there. Just go have fun and connect with other people. It's about really setting expectations so that you can have a good time, but not take the stress with you. We need to think about self-care as preventative. So that's like you take a daily multivitamin, you go for a walk. It's from a medical perspective. Survival is you're at the emergency room.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is move out of that and back to where self-care really can have an impact.
So out of reactionary, more towards preventative.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense. Now, Chad, you're just chock full of tips and tricks of navigating our lives on this little blue marble we call Earth. How can someone get in touch with you, maybe set an appointment and start their healing journey?
So just MichiganTherapyandCounseling.com. They can go to the website. We have an office in Cadillac. We have an office in Marquette. We'll work with anybody in Northern Michigan virtually, and we welcome everybody. So just reach out and we'll help you navigate the system.
And especially during this very tricky time of year, if you need any help, just a reminder here, if it's an emergency, to dial 988 for a crisis specialist. If you're looking to start a more long-term healing journey, you need to call this man right here. Chad, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your insight.